Another interesting thing that we can do is let's move the moon over here to the far corner. Let's bring it down to about, right there or so. Now, let's start turning up the gain and see what happens. Right there. Now, let's adjust this a little. Look right here. If you look very carefully, you can see the dark portion of the moon. Now, this is thrown off a little bit because this is so bright. But if we move this over a little bit, now, when we increase the exposure time, look what happens to the rest of the moon. You can really quite easily see that. Now if we move it over to the side here a little bit, and we'll bring this exposure up a little bit more. Let's see what happens. We went from a 1-second exposure to a 4-second exposure. And when we do that, we can very clearly see the portions of the moon that are currently in shadow. As a matter of fact, if you look carefully, there's the Sea of Crisis right there. Notice this large, round, dark area. Here's the Sea of Fertility, and the Sea of Tranquility is right there. But you can very clearly see them. They're just much darker than the sunlit portions. Those are stars. Notice you don't see any stars behind the lit portion of the moon. All you see is the rim of the craters, maybe a mountain peak here and there. These are mountain peaks. But you can very clearly see the moon is here, and these are just mountain peaks. Now, one other thing that we might want to do is we may want to take some measurements. So what I've done is I've put up the crosshairs onto the image of the moon, and as you can see, this outer circle pretty much follows the rim of the moon. Let's see, up a little bit, there we go. That looks pretty good. Now, the shadow portion of the moon should continue along here. Let's go ahead and change our exposure time and see what happens. Well, will you look at that? There is the edge of the moon. Now notice it's not perfectly lined up. We could maybe get it a little bit better like that. Notice that the glare of the moon extends well beyond the actual rim of the moon, which is behind this circle right here. But that follows right along. Now, the last thing is the moon moving and is it in orbit? Well, let's go ahead and have a quick look. So here we are. We know that this portion of the moon is present, but it's currently in shadow, so we don't see it in a normal view. Now, the other thing that I want to show you is right down here. Notice this crescent. This means that we are doing a lunar tracking rate, and as a result, the moon is staying right in the crosshairs. Okay, so what happens if we change this to the sidereal tracking rate from the lunar tracking rate? And notice the solar tracking rate is different as well. Now if we go back here to the lunar tracking rate, notice that the moon stays right in the target. That's not a star shining through the moon, that's the rim of a crater. We also have some mountaintops that have illumination from the oblique sun. Notice the shading in the craters. We have a side with shadow, which is towards the sun, and then we have a side that's fully sunlit on the opposite side of the crater from the sun. To some deeper craters in the moon, you'll see that effect very clearly, this three-dimensional effect of a scooped out crater. The side towards the sun is in shadow, the side opposite the sun is sunlit, and that happens in both. How about a mountain? The face of the mountain towards the sun is sunlit, and there is a shadow behind it. You know, flat earthers like to talk about their P900s and their P1000s. You can easily get these views of the moon, the P900 or P1000. You can change the contrast or the exposure length, make sure you put it on a tripod, and you can very clearly identify these bright objects as rims of craters or mountaintops, and there's certainly no reason to confuse them for stars. You can also take a longer exposure and very clearly see the shaded portion of the moon. Notice all of the glare that you get, which is much larger than the moon itself, but it's still exactly the right size and shape. So, looks like we're getting a few clouds in, so we're going to go ahead and shut down. Thank you very much for joining me, and remember, flat earthers say the darndest things.